Well, the NFL offseason has officially begun. For me, I see it more as the second leg of the NFL season because we have a ton going on. It's not like the NBA where it's quiet for a while. And this is an entirely second season in the NFL. They have perfected this. I had a conversation with somebody about this the other day, but they were saying how the NFL has perfected the offseason to keep the fan engaged. And I think that's why they are king compared to the NBA, the NHL, and especially I would say the NBA is the closest because of free agency. I would say the MLB is the worst because of free agency. And, you know, we have the draft, we have free agency, we have a ton of stuff to talk about this offseason. Now, when June and July come, that's when I get bored and I have to force myself to watch June baseball. But I have 3 topics I want to talk about in the NFL today in my Yap session. But before I do that, please hit the subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It helps me, helps the channel. Appreciate you. Love you. All right, the 3 topics is going to be the Bengals. They just franchise tagged T. Higgins officially today. And then 2 is going to be Aaron Rodgers and what his future looks like in the NFL. And 3 is going to be Kellen Moore officially becoming the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, which I found very surprising, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. So I want to start with this. The Cincinnati Bengals are the worst run organization in the NFL, and the T. Higgins getting a franchise tag for a second year in a row proves that. It proves to me you're going to do the same thing you did last year. You are going to franchise tag T. Higgins. You're not going to sign him to a long-term contract. He's going to cost a stupid amount of money for this year, which wastes all this cap space that the Cincinnati Bengals have instead of getting a long-term contract done. Now, if you don't think that you want to sign Jamar Chase to a big deal and T. Higgins to a big deal and have hundreds of millions of dollars wrapped up in 2 receivers, then why franchise tag him? Why even do it at this point? Because you can take all of that cap space that the Bengals have and all of these assets that they have, and you can turn that into a good defense. So it's either you extend him and you still have the cap space for the defense, or you let him go to free agency, let him test the market, you get him off the books, you still have a talented offense, and you can go all in. And you make sure that you get Jamar Chase locked up. You make sure you get Trey Hendrickson, who led the NFL in sacks, by the way, locked up. But instead, you're more focused on the wide receiver 2, who is very talented, but is barely on the field, is always hurt. We don't know if he's actually wide receiver 1 caliber. Somebody is going to overpay for him. And a good general manager would say, or a good owner, I should say at this point, I shouldn't even blame the general manager. I should blame the owner because he feels a lot of pressure at this point to pay these guys. And he should sit there and say, hey, I will pay them, but should we wrap it up in 2 receivers? I understand how talented T. Higgins is. He's not talented enough for me to be a wide receiver 2 and get $30+ million a year. That's just not happening. And now you're stuck in a limbo in a middle situation where you have T. Higgins on the franchise tag. You now have to pay Jamar Chase a contract extension. And now you also have Trey Hendrickson, who is going to demand a new contract. He said that this offseason. He said, I'm going to demand a trade for a second year in a row if I don't get a contract extension, which fair. And those should be the 2 priorities for the Bengals. But instead, they're more wrapped up in the T. Higgins situation and let's franchise tag him and waste all this cap space when we have to sign Jamar Chase and sign Trey Hendrickson. I just think at this point, and the reason why I think that the Bengals are the worst run organization in the NFL compared to like the Browns, the Raiders, or the Jags, is because they actually do have the pieces in place to win now. They were just in the Super Bowl less than 5 years ago. This team is built on a top, I would argue, I mean, it's not even an argument at this point after this year, but a top 4 quarterback in the NFL, the big 4. You have Jamar Chase, the Triple Crown winner. You have Trey Hendrickson, who led the league in sacks, and yet you're going to franchise tag and waste cap space on a wide receiver 2. Those are the decisions where I'm like, this team, this organization, this owner doesn't know how to spend money or spend it where or spend it correctly. Or he's just cheap enough where he just says, well, we'll keep him for 1 year, Joe. We'll keep him for a year because you keep asking for it, right? So we'll have him on the team, but we won't be able to spend money anywhere else because you wanted T. Higgins on the team, even though that's not what Joe Burrow was asking for. So at this point, the Bengals are just wasting Joe Burrow's prime, because if they don't get a long-term extension done with T. Higgins and they waste that cap space that can go to, maybe another pass rusher, to go to another corner, you probably need a cornerback one, wouldn't you think? I just believe that the Bengals are wasting a huge opportunity, especially in an AFC where now people might be questioning, can we beat the Chiefs? We know how to beat the Chiefs. It's getting a defensive line. It's getting an offensive line, which they have done a decent job of, to me, at least with the offensive line. They've tried, but now they need to reallocate where their priorities are. Because right now, being wrapped up in T. Higgins wanting a franchise tag is ridiculous. So you either contract extend him or you let him go and test the waters, because he's a wide receiver too on your team and you've got bigger fish to fry. So that's topic number one. Number two, I want to get into Aaron Rodgers. And I have a lot of thoughts about Aaron Rodgers. I've learned a lot about NFL teams because of Aaron Rodgers. No team in the NFL should want Aaron Rodgers because culture means more than talent in the NFL. And I learned that over the past couple years, because I used to think, well, if you just stack your roster with great, weapons everywhere and all these big names, you're going to win a Super Bowl. That's not really how it works. I mean, we can kind of see it with the Eagles. A lot of their guys, except for, Saquon, they added on to their homegrown guys. But you look at that defense, that's all homegrown talent. That is culture. At this point, they drafted guys from Georgia. That is culture. They know how to win at all phases of football. And stats do not turn into wins. The argument for Aaron Rodgers is going to be, well, he had a great season. He had 28 touchdowns, only 11 picks. It's not, he had a great second half, but it's much bigger than just Aaron played pretty well for the situation that he was in with no head coach. It's more of, does Aaron Glenn want a culture with a quarterback who doesn't really care about the team, wants to say how he feels all the time, wants to take shots at the media? And we've seen this over the past couple years, how the NFL is transitioning away from, hey, you're really talented, but do you fit our team? I want you to think about this for a second. So, Aaron Glenn has a very talented football team. Look at it from Aaron Glenn's perspective. He has great defensive pieces. He has great offensive pieces. I mean, you're coming to a team with Sauce Gardner, who won Defensive Rookie of the Year. You have Breece Hall in your backfield. You have Garrett Wilson on the outside. The offensive line could use some work, but the pieces are there, except for the quarterback now. But think about this. Think about the Lions with Dan Campbell. Do you think the Lions, when Dan Campbell was hired, had a better roster than what Aaron Glenn is getting right now? How about the Houston Texans with DeMeco Ryans? You think that the Jets don't have a better roster right now than what DeMeco Ryans was coming into? And think about it from the perspective they had the second overall pick and we didn't know how C.J. Stroud was going to end up. And how about the Washington Commanders? I'd argue last year coming in, I know it's hard to look back and say, the Commanders or the Texans or the Lions, they were bad organizations at one point with less talent than what the Jets have. I think that the Jets have more talent than all three of those teams I just listed. And what made those teams better? What took the Lions from being a disgrace in the NFL? What took the Houston Texans from being a laughingstock in the NFL who just lost their franchise quarterback to the Cleveland Browns? What took the Washington Commanders being another laughingstock with no quarterback, no head coach, no culture, terrible defense? What did it take? It took a head coach with culture, getting the guys out who don't fit that culture, who are not bought in. Think about the Lions. They have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. They have tough, hard-nosed guys. Think about the Texans. They have a younger group with a younger head coach who wants to build something in Houston. Washington, you have a tough-nosed head coach in Dan Quinn, and you get the second overall pick, and you say, we are going to fix all of the cultural pieces around this team. That is more important than having a quarterback throw 28 touchdowns or 30 touchdowns or 40 touchdowns and giving you problems every single week. Because Aaron Rodgers had a better season than Zach Wilson did, but yet they had more losses. Why do you think that is? Because Aaron is not bought into this team. And Aaron Glenn wants somebody bought into the team. He saw it in Detroit, and he wants to run it back and do it with the Jets. And it's exactly what the Jets need. So the Jets win this. I mean, yes, they take on a lot of dead money, but so did the Broncos with Russell Wilson. They did that. They had basically the same situation. You sign a guy to a big contract. He doesn't fit your culture. He doesn't fit what you want to do. You're just restarting. So good on the Jets. Aaron Rodgers, if I were a team who was really bad, like the Raiders, the Browns, whoever, who needs a culture fix and needs a fix, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be your fix. All right, let's talk about Kellen Moore getting hired. So I have this take about Kellen Moore being hired by the Saints, which a lot of people might not agree with. But Kellen Moore is going to miss Jalen Hurts more than Jalen Hurts is going to miss Kellen Moore. And what I hate about this entire situation with Jalen Hurts winning the Super Bowl, because I'm a big Jalen Hurts guy, he performed well. Could 10 or 15 quarterbacks win the Super Bowl with that roster? Maybe. I don't know. I don't talk hypotheticals. Jalen Hurts is a Super Bowl champion. But what did Kellen Moore do before getting to the Philadelphia Eagles? I'm curious. I want to know, because he was with Dallas and he got ran out of town for Mike McCarthy to become the offensive coordinator. He had Justin Herbert with the Chargers, and he was ran out of town again. He had the 21st ranked offense. But Jalen Hurts, I mean, this guy in 2022, he went to a Super Bowl without Kellen Moore. He went to a Super Bowl without Saquon Barkley. He went to a Super Bowl with a less talented team than he does now. Now, how about Kellen Moore? Because he hasn't performed anywhere. And you could say the same things that you're saying for Jalen Hurts for Kellen Moore. You can sit there and say, hey, you have Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith. How hard, the best offensive line in the NFL, how hard is it to be how many offensive coordinators could do what Kellen Moore is doing right now? And I guarantee the next guy coming in next year is going to perform just as well as what Kellen Moore did, because he didn't do anything that blew my socks off. He did what you're supposed to do. You give the ball to Saquon Barkley 20 times a game. You run play action. You get the ball out of Jalen Hurts' arm quick. That's the thing where I'm sitting there everybody is shitting on Jalen Hurts, saying oh, he couldn't win without. I mean, he's been there without these guys. But with Kellen Moore, it's oh, this is a great hire for the Saints. Oh, he's going to change the call. What has he done without Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley? He is a merchant of those pieces. He was terrible before that. And he's had good quarterbacks, really good quarterbacks, as good as Jalen. Better. In my opinion, I think Justin's better. And that's the thing. Jalen Hurts has won in the playoffs before Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore has not won anything before Jalen Hurts. Let's just remember that. So going into a team with no quarterback, with a terrible cap situation, basically only two weapons on the offense, Olave and Alvin Kamara at this point. I mean, I just don't see it working with Kellen Moore and the Saints. It really just doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm really surprised that the Saints went that direction, but he's probably the only person that would take that job. So, I mean, good for him, but at this point, I think Jalen Hurts is more valuable, way more valuable, and I think he'll be just fine without Kellen Moore, and he's done it before, and I think that Kellen Moore is going to really struggle. I think he gets fired in 2 years. All right, that's the Yap Sesh for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Once again, just hit that subscribe, share. We're going to do more topics next week, probably 5 topics each week going forward. Only 3 this week because we're in the middle of the week. I appreciate you guys. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you next week.